Welcome to the National Museum of Ireland Archaeology. My name is Siobhan.
And my name is Trisha. We are museum educators, and today we're going to take a look inside the museum and learn about archaeology and all things Viking. Let's go!
So what is archaeology? Archaeology is the study of what people made and used in the past, so we can learn more about how people used to live long ago. An archaeologist is someone who studies the past to find out how people lived hundreds or even thousands of years ago. It is their job to find out what types of homes people made and lived in, what food they ate and how they got it, what kinds of clothes and jewellery people wore, how they bought goods, and what they believed in. A great way to find out about how people lived is through artefacts. An artefact is a really old object that was made and used by people in the past, and we have lots of them here at the museum. We have some of the oldest objects found in Ireland on display, including stone axes made from flint dating way back to the Stone Age, Bronze Age gold objects, and objects used by the Vikings. But where do these artefacts come from? Sometimes people find artefacts by accident. Artefacts have been found by people strolling along the beach, by workers digging new roads, and sometimes by farmers ploughing their land. However, artefacts are mostly found during an excavation. An excavation is what happens when archaeologists discover a place where they know people lived in the past, and they very carefully and slowly dig up the area. The excavation uncovers how people used the area in the past, and when they excavate, sometimes artefacts are found. When archaeologists find artefacts, they want to find out more about them and also want to look after them. They use science to do this.
Science is used by archaeologists to study artefacts. They use science to find out things such as how old the artefact is, how it was made, and what it was made from. If an archaeologist finds something made out of wood, leather, or even cloth, they can use a technique called radiocarbon dating to test how old the artefact is. A tiny piece of the artefact is sent to a laboratory, and they use a special machine to find this out. This artefact is a fish trap. It is made out of wood, and carbon dating tells us that it's over 7,000 years old. Very often, artefacts are broken or they have started to fall apart before they are found by archaeologists. It is really important that artefacts are kept safe from further damage. At the museum, we use science to protect the artefacts. This is called conservation. This is bog butter, and it's over 2,000 years old. The butter was found in a bog in County Kildare. Because bogs are cold, just like your fridge at home, it stopped the butter from rotting. Today, it is kept in a case at the museum, and it isn't smelly or mouldy. This is because conservators have put a chemical on it to stop it from rotting. At the museum, we study and look after all of the artefacts that have been found in Ireland. We keep them safe so that everyone, including you, can come and see them, find out more about them, and learn how people in Ireland lived in the past.
Vikings first came to Ireland over 1,200 years ago. They mainly came from Norway, but some also came from Denmark and Sweden, an area called Scandinavia. To reach Ireland, they travelled west and went around Scotland. They used big boats called Longships to travel across the sea. Could this be a Viking longship? No, it's way too small. This is a replica or a copy of a Viking fishing boat, which were made in a very similar way, just much smaller. Archaeologists can tell by looking at the remains of Viking ships that they were brilliant boat builders and sailors. When the Vikings first arrived in Ireland, many of them were warriors in search of treasure. At this time, churches in Ireland had very beautiful objects made out of gold, silver and amber, just like this artefact here. This is the Ardagh chalice, found in County Limerick, and would have been used by priests during the celebration of a Christian Mass. These were the type of objects the Vikings were looking for, so they attacked monasteries with long swords, axes, spears and shields, taking whatever treasure they could find. Archaeologists have discovered if a Viking warrior died in a battle or on a raid, they would be carefully buried with their longsword and other weapons, like these ones discovered in Kilmainham, Dublin. The Vikings believed that after they died, they would travel to Valhalla and meet all of the Viking gods, including Odin, Thor and Freya. Do you think Vikings had horns on their helmets? No, they didn't. In fact, archaeologists have found very little evidence that Vikings even wore helmets. Only one helmet has ever been found. It was discovered in Norway and made of iron. A Viking's favourite metal was actually silver, not gold. Sometimes when Vikings found enough silver or silver coins, they would melt the silver down to make an arm ring or a beautiful brooch, like these ones found in different places around Ireland. Brooches were used to secure cloaks, and arm rings were worn as jewellery on their upper arms. If they wanted to buy something, sometimes they broke off a little bit of silver from an arm ring to pay for it. However, the Vikings didn't always attack monasteries. After a while, archaeologists have discovered they settled in Ireland. They built homes and created towns. They built towns at Dublin, Waterford, Wexford, Limerick and Cork, and over time these grew into the cities we know today. A Viking house was made of wood, straw and mud. They had one big room where all the family lived, and large benches at either side where they slept. In the middle there was a fire, and in the winter time their animals stayed inside. Archaeologists have excavated in Dublin, and they discovered that the town built by the Vikings was very carefully planned and laid out. In fact, some of the streets we still walk down today, such as Fishamble Street and Wine Tavern Street, have been there since the Vikings. Did you know that Dublin was an important centre of travel and trade for the Vikings? They brought walrus ivory and whalebone from Iceland and amber from the Baltic Sea. Amber is fossilised tree resin that hardens over millions of years. The Vikings were also very good at making things. They were great craftspeople. They carved this amber into beads to make bracelets, rings and pendants for necklaces. Dublin was an important place for making objects that people used in their day-to-day lives. Finds from excavations have shown that people used leather to make bags and shoes. In Dublin, archaeologists even found this leather boot that was worn by a child. They also used wood to make barrels, bowls and handles. These were found during excavations at Fishamble Street, and this was carved with Viking animal decoration. They also used animal bones to make objects. They carved deer antler to make this comb. They even used ivory from a walrus to make dice so that they could play games. Do you think the Vikings were well dressed or really scruffy? Excavations and artefacts tell us that clothes were very important to the Vikings and they were well looked after. This is a piece of whalebone from the Viking graveyard in Kilmainham that has been carved into an ironing board plaque, which was used with a glass linen smoother to smooth out and iron clothes. Many women wore a dress and an apron or a pinafore, which they tied with a pair of oval brooches at the shoulders instead of using buttons. Oval brooches like these from Finglas in Dublin were made from a mixture of different metals called copper alloy, and sometimes had silver and gold on them. In between the brooches, they had a string of beads made from glass and amber. Men wore a tunic and trousers made out of wool. They didn't have any zips, so instead wore a belt to hold it up. They carried their objects in small leather pouches on their belt to keep them safe. To conclude, although when the Vikings first came to Ireland, they raided and attacked monasteries, they then settled here, built their homes and towns. Irish people traded with the Vikings in the towns and they started mixing. The Vikings married Irish people, and some Vikings became Christians, just like a lot of Irish people were at the time. It's archaeology that has really helped us to piece together this history of the Vikings, from when they arrived to when they settled here. The long-lasting impact of the Vikings is one we still see all around us today. And when walking down the street in many Irish towns, you might be walking where the Vikings walked 1,000 years ago.
Often, when we think of the places in Ireland where Vikings used to roam, we think of areas along the coast, such as Dublin, Waterford, Wexford, Limerick and Cork. This is because they mainly used ships to travel. But did you know that the Vikings also used their boats to travel up the rivers to go to the Midlands in Ireland? From around 837 AD, about 40 years after the very first Viking raids in Ireland, the Vikings used boats to travel up many Irish rivers, including the Liffey, the Boyne, the Barrow and the River Shannon. To help them travel into the Midlands, the Vikings began building long forts. These were camps built beside rivers where they stayed during the winter months to keep their ships safe. To protect the camp, they built a large bank made of soil and clay. Some long forts were located near the coast, such as Linduchel in County Louth and Woodstown in County Waterford. These long forts were used as a base for the Vikings to travel up the rivers to reach the Midlands. The Vikings also built long forts when they reached the Midlands. Long forts have been found by archaeologists at Dunrally in County Laois and Ballykeeron-Little near the River Shannon in County Westmeath. There is also evidence of Viking fleets travelling along the River Shannon from Limerick all the way to Lochry. Artefacts found in the River Shannon tell us more about Viking activity in the Midlands. A Viking sword was found in the river near Banagher in County Offaly in 2012. This sword was so well preserved by the water that a piece of cloth from the handle survived. In 1986, a Viking axe was also found in the river near Athlone in County Westmeath. Both of these artefacts could have been used by the Vikings. They may have been lost while they were travelling along the River Shannon. Archaeologists have found a lot of silver from the Viking Age in Ireland. The Vikings collected silver from their raids. Sometimes these are bits and pieces broken off other objects. This is called hack silver. The Vikings also traded and used silver coins to buy things. Instead of carrying around lots of little pieces of silver, they melt them down into little lumps called ingots. To keep their silver safe, sometimes the Vikings would bury it in the ground with the hope that someday they could retrieve it. This is called a hoard. Two very large Viking silver hoards were found at Loch Ennell in County Westmeath, together weighing over 45 kilograms. One of these was found on the lakeshore of Carrick, and it is the largest Viking Age silver hoard found in Ireland, weighing over 31 kilograms. That's about as heavy as 200 large bananas. Another Viking silver hoard was found at Loch Canal in County Longford. This is called the Ballywillen hoard. Altogether, there are over 38 pieces of silver in this hoard, weighing over 250 grams. The Vikings also traded with the Irish who lived in the Midlands. In 1932, at Ballinderry in County Westmeath, archaeologists excavated a crannog, a type of house built on a small island on a lake. It is likely that an Irish chieftain lived in this crannog. Even though Irish people lived here, archaeologists found a lot of artefacts that would normally be found at Viking sites. One artefact they found was this Viking sword. Can you see its shape and decoration on the top of the handle? We know this is a Viking sword because of the shape of the handle and the decoration that's on it. The name Ulfber is written on the blade, which tells us who made the blade. Many of these types of swords were made in the Rhineland in Germany and were used by the Vikings. They also found other Viking artefacts here, including a longbow, spears, an axe head, and a gaming board. This board was most likely used to play a Viking board game called Nafeltafel. These artefacts and the archaeological evidence that we have looked at tells us a lot about the Vikings. We now know that the Vikings were very active throughout all of Ireland, from the coasts to the rivers and into the Midlands.